Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Nebraska Football Now. I'm your host, Andy Klassen, joined again by our Husker insider, Jake Bartecki. Jake, this one kind of hurt, didn't it?
Sure did, man. I mean, I felt like, we talked about it before, I felt like this was kind of a tipping point in the season. Right. We'll see if it is going forward.
Well, let's just rip off the Band-Aid, right? Let's get right into it. What are three keys, pressing issues that you kind of saw come from that UCLA debacle? That was a tough game, a tough pill to swallow.
It's hard to limit them to just three, but I think the three most glaring for me was the offensive play calling. We look back to the Ohio State game, the swing passes, the kind of lack of aggression, if you will. Yeah. That was one. The play calling I did not think was up to snuff. Second was the run defense. I think the run defense for Nebraska the last few weeks, you got to kind of go back to the Northern Iowa game. It hasn't been, I think, to the standard. And the third would be probably just generally how Nebraska came out of the gates in that one. It seems like it's sort of been a trend throughout the Ohio State game, because I think they came out with a lot of fire in that one despite a rough start. But I didn't like how they started the game. They looked flat and slow again.
Well, let's dive right into that. A lot of times you get that home field advantage. You're playing at home, a big-time crowd all pulling for you. You're coming off a decent showing, right, at Ohio State. Maybe surprise some people. Feel good about yourself. How does this team continue to keep coming out flat and then, takes a quarter, takes a half before they really get into the rhythm of the game?
That's a tough question for me to answer, because I really look at this as a thing for Nebraska that probably starts in practice. Are they coming out this flat in practice? Are they starting early morning practice sessions? Because Nebraska's a team that practices early in the morning. How are they kind of going through their practice sessions? And we've seen it going back to the Purdue game. Matt Rule does those Oklahoma lineman drill before the game. And I thought there was one, Carter Nelson was out there. I mean, he's getting guys that necessarily aren't in Oklahoma drill live game situations doing that pregame to get a little bit of spunk into them. Right. I hope that that's not necessarily because he's worried how the team is going to come out of the gates, and more that he wants the team to come out even more energized than they already were. So I really, it's tough to answer that, because you said it. I mean, you come off an Ohio State game where you should have all the momentum on your side. You nearly beat the number 4 team in the country. You're at home. You can get bowl eligible for the first time since 2016. To come out as flat as they did was concerning.
Another concerning thing that's caught a lot of attention is the offensive play calling, and more, to the point, Coach Satterfield, the offensive coordinator. Is it fair that he's catching this much heat? Because we've talked about the play calling, but there were times in the UCLA game where a screen pass would have been a perfect play call, but he got away from it, it seemed like. Is he letting the tail kind of wag the dog here with the fan base, or is it something else? What's going on with Satterfield, and is it fair to just kind of point out one guy like that?
Well, it's just, the play calling is sort of his style, right? I mean, you can look at the NFL and you look at a team like the Chiefs, who right now is not blowing anybody out, but they're continually wearing teams down because they're able to really well execute a 5 to 8 yard pass game. I mean, they don't have Tyreek Hill like they had in the past. Now Patrick Mahomes has to utilize 5 to 8 yard passes. I don't think Nebraska is able to execute that game plan. So when you realize that, which I feel like you've seen already and you have realized it, you got to move off it. You got to try something different. Now, the second part of your question, is it fair for fans to want him gone? The short answer is yes, but that isn't going to happen, I don't think, because you aren't going to demote Marcus Satterfield, who you're paying $1.3 million to just coach tight ends or just coach running backs or whatever offensive unit he would get demoted to. I think there's other guys in that offensive coaching staff that you can move around, or Ed Foley, the special teams coach. If you move off of Satterfield, you're moving off of him permanently. I think there is an option, though, to maybe hand off some of the play calling duties to somebody else. And I think the first person that would come to mind would be quarterback coach Glenn Thomas. I mean, he's worked as a play caller before. Dylan Raiola, he's got a great relationship with his freshman quarterback. That's who I think probably would be more likely to step in if there was a change with Marcus Satterfield.
Well, during this bye week, Coach Rule did talk about getting some new eyes onto the program, maybe help find some solutions that even he, the head man, is missing. And we got some sound bites, so let's go to that right now.
My job's always to consider everything. I think part of that is, what are the problems? What are the issues? It's looking at everything. So I think one of the first things I'm doing this week is, I have a lot of friends in the business, had some outside people kind of come in and look at, hey, tell me what you see. and I think that's probably at least in my history, one of the best things you can do is just have a fresh set of eyes, look at it.
Alrighty, so he made it official. We heard rumblings about this, rumors throughout the season and in the summer even. Dana Holgorsen had a real long stint as the head coach at West Virginia, had a lot of success there. Also had some success at Houston, his most recent stop as a head coach. What do you make of bringing a guy like that tenured of an offensive mind throughout college football, into the program? For me, it sounds like he's sending a clear message to his entire staff, like, we got to figure it out, and everybody is on notice.
Yeah, and that's a guy that came from a high-ranking position, right? I mean, those two schools that you mentioned were known for offense. They were known for moving the football. They were known for being high-powered. You think of defensive schools? Yeah. I don't think of defensive schools when I think of the schools he's been to, especially Houston. Yeah. So I sort of feel like he's looking at this from a perspective of, all right, we need to fix something in the offense. Obviously, my coaching staff, myself, can't do it. I commend Matt Rule for admitting that he wants to get some extra help, because I think in prior coaching staffs, that's not something we would have seen Nebraska coaches do. I commend him for doing that. I don't know if it'll make a huge difference, because you're only with the playmakers you've got, and unless he's really starting to have a hand in the play calling duties, it's still going to be up to Marcus Satterfield. But I do get the sense that his impact could possibly shift some of the thinking and the strategy for the offense.
One of the key points that a lot of people point to, former players, fans alike, what happened to the offensive play calling? It used to be so aggressive, or it felt more aggressive earlier in the season. Now we're seeing a little bit more watered down type of play call. Do you think Holgorsen might help open things up, or is that the hope across Husker Nation and within that coaching staff?
Well, you certainly hope so, right? Because you look back at, I think, the first half from the Colorado game, and especially against UTEP. I mean, Nebraska went out and got Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair. And I sort of feel like they thought those guys were going to be the difference makers in the offense. Nebraska was second to last in the nation in passing offense a year ago. Obviously, things didn't work out with Jeff Sims. Heinrich Harburg wasn't great, didn't have great targets to throw to. Have Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks been great? No, but I sort of feel like at the same level, you also need to give them the opportunity to be great. They haven't taken many shots down the field. The latest guy that I've seen that Nebraska's kind of used as a deep threat lately has been Naor, but it's also been Thomas Fidone. I sort of feel like you've got wide receivers that have the ability to change a game, but they haven't really had the chance to do that. Ja'Cory Barney's been another that's kind of worked out well in the slant. I would love to see them get more aggressive, and hopefully Dana Holgorsen brings that.
You'd like to think so. Another blow that the Huskers had to take was seeing their young quarterback really take a shot. He tried to get back out on the field, went right back down. It looks like a lower back injury. Yeah. Do you have any current news or up-to-date news? I know you're around the program quite a bit. Yeah,
he will be good to go. All signs point to he will be good to go for USC. He said after the game that he was going to come in for more checks and screens and MRIs, and everything came back good for that for Dylan Raiola. I mean, it was just he got hit in the back, and he said it was just an area he hasn't really been hit before, and it's a tough spot to take a hit.
Since we're speaking about Raiola, there's also been some criticism thrown his way, stating that there's been a regression throughout the season, not ascending and getting better and better, but he's actually been taking a step back. Is that fair to say, or is it more about the schedule getting more difficult? Because I tend to say we had easier teams, especially in a non-conference, earlier in the season. Colorado's looking like a better win.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, no, top 25.
But you got to feel like Indiana's a lot better than we thought they were going to be. Ohio State is Ohio State. Yeah. I think there has to be a balance there between this regression talk and maybe a more difficult schedule down the stretch here.
Yeah, I mean, his PFF grades have gone down. I mean, he was grading out super high for that first couple of games. I mean, you look at the UTEP game, was there going to be nerves? There were none. I mean, we talked about that with taking shots down the field. He made them look easy and made some tough throws. Colorado, I thought the same thing. I thought he was a little gutsy and made some throws. I think it's a little bit of both, though, to answer your question about the schedule or if it's a regression. I think it's the schedule because he is still a freshman. He's playing against Big Ten opponents, right? And he's played against, I thought, some decent defenses. I thought Greg Schiano's game plan for the Rutgers game was pretty solid. They have not looked like a great defense since then. But I thought for that game, their game plan was smart. I thought UCLA, credit to Sean Foster. I thought his defense looked really good against Nebraska. I thought he talked about it post-game. He wanted to get Raiola off his rhythm. He did that. And I think it's concerning that he was so easily knocked off his horse with the rhythm. Because to talk about the regression part, a lot of that I think is on Marcus Satterfield. I'm sorry, I'll just say it. I think it has been. I don't think he's been given the opportunities or the tools to really show what he can do yet. We saw him start running the ball more. That's great.
Yeah.
Of course, then he gets hit a week later. I think the regression is not necessarily his fault. He's had some freshman mistakes. Mentioned the Rutgers game again. High snap through an interception. But I sort of feel like the regression is not on him. He's dealt with a tough schedule, and he hasn't had the tools to necessarily show what he can do yet.
Okay, well, there's plenty of constructive criticism to go around. Let's put our focus on the defense. It almost felt like they fell asleep at the wheel during prep throughout the week. They're like, this is one of the worst rushing offenses in the nation.
Yeah.
We're one of the best rushing defenses. We can take our foot off the gas or something. I don't know what the mindset was, but UCLA did a really good job through their rushing attack. At one point, they're at 156 yards, and some late sacks took away from that. But they had their best day of the season against the Black Shirts. What caused that breakdown?
Yeah, so they had 113 yards. First time they put over 100 yards up on an opponent in the Big Ten this season. And they entered the game 133rd nationally rushing the football. I mean, that is, and we talked about it last week. I thought this was a game where Nebraska's defensive line specifically should have feasted.
Right.
And they really didn't. I thought they got blown up. I thought there were way too big of holes. And I think the one where I kind of just put my head in my hands and I said, oh, here we go again, was Garber's, the 57-yard run. I mean, that was a broken play. Nebraska did not think he was going to run. He's not necessarily a running quarterback, but he's got some speed. Took off and ran, and then, of course, they started running the ball a few more times and set up a touchdown. Nebraska's defense running the football has not been great. We've talked about trying to stack the box and force them to throw. Well, you couldn't really do that comfortably, at least, because you were down so many guys in the secondary. Jeremiah Charles was a starter in that game. He had been mostly a kickoff special teams guy. It was not a great matchup for Nebraska on the field. Credit Eric Bieniemy. I thought he drew up some great plays for UCLA in that one. Nebraska's got a lot to work on, and that's another thing that Rule talked about. He's bringing in these fresh set of eyes, not only for the offense, but he's got people looking at the defense too. I don't necessarily think we're going to see a defensive consultant hired, at least not one to the standard of Holgorsen, but make no mistake about it, he is focusing on the defense and trying to get it better.
We also got some audio from Coach Rule. He looked a little tired, a little beat up at his last presser, talking about their mindset, the team's mindset, and coaches heading into this bye week. Has to focus on recruiting, but he's not trying to take his foot off the gas. He's treating this like a game week mentality. Take a listen.
You know, for me as the head coach, looking at everything that we're doing, I think it's for each assistant coach looking at everything that we're doing. You know, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? I think it's for each player. You know, bad organizations point fingers. Good organizations look at themselves, and this is a tough time. So we have to be a good organization and look at ourselves and challenge ourselves. And it's also a week of recruiting. You know, that was disappointing on Saturday. Yet I'm in the office at 9:00 on Sunday, meeting with recruits that were there and came in the next day because, you know, they do see a great game day atmosphere, a great place. They see us playing freshmen, and so. You will hit the road as well. So I think it's a lot of, like I said, a lot of introspection. At the same time, we have to get ready for USC, and so we're gonna game plan them today. We're treating this like this isn't a bye week. This is a game week for us. You know, we're staying here late tonight working on USC. We worked on USC yesterday, so probably those three things kind of in a combination.
Okay, Jake, like I say this every week, it sounds good. What Coach Rule is saying, what he is preaching, not only to his team through the media, but to us, the fans. It sounds good. I want to believe it. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's always handled bye weeks well. The results, obviously, after bye weeks have not been great. They've been 0-3 out of the bye this season. So, you know, I think talking about the recruiting, this is a great time to get out there face-to-face with some guys, and he talked about it. I mean, he was there the next Sunday with guys, even after a loss. So, I mean, he's not taking his foot off the gas with recruiting, but he's also not taking his foot off the gas with practicing either. I mean, this is another game where I don't know if Nebraska will be favored. USC's 4-5, but they've got probably the more skilled players on their side of the field. So Nebraska's going to have to be ready, and I think they're going to work through the bye week to be ready.
Well, let's talk about that. USC, they're going to have a bye week, but they've also taken their lumps here in the Big Ten, dropped another tough game. They're also making a transition at quarterback. For me, it feels like this might be a spot. I know you're going on the road, but you have a week to get healthy. You also have a week to prepare for a new quarterback at USC. That should favor your defense maybe more than their offense.
Yeah, we'll see who Lincoln Riley decides to go with that quarterback, but it sounds like it won't be Miller Moss. He's been banged up, hasn't also had the best of weeks the last few. So I think that's a win for Nebraska because Miller Moss, I mean, coming into the season, he was looking like he was going to be a possible Heisman candidate. And he's got a good arm, he's got a good IQ. So we'll see if who Nebraska gets matched up with.
Do you have an early prediction at all, or are you still measuring this one up?
I haven't really thought about it. That might be a question for next week, but yeah, no, I haven't thought about it. I mean, I will say this though, I'm not picking Nebraska to win. I don't know a score yet, but the way the last few weeks have gone, we talk a lot about expectations on the show. My expectations after the Indiana game, I told you, I still think 7 or 8 wins is feasible. I will say, I mean, I think Nebraska's got to just try to get 1 out of these next 3. And I think it's got to be USC or Wisconsin because you do not want to go on a Black Friday night game in what's going to be a hostile environment. It's a 6:30 game at Kinnick Stadium against Iowa to end the season. You do not want to go there trying to get bowl eligible for what feels like the millionth year against the Hawkeyes.
No, I kind of like that. Maybe take a big picture prediction right now, not the next game, but I feel you got to put Iowa in its own little shelf right now. They just hung 42 points. Their offense is rolling. You got to get one of these next 2, and USC with all the transitions they're making, still kind of reeling. Their first year in the Big Ten, it feels like. You want to get that next win sooner than later. This might be the spot Nebraska really has to hone in and get it done.
Yeah, and I would still put this as the second most winnable game out of the next 3, the last 3 for Nebraska. I think I'd still go with Wisconsin number 1. I have not been impressed with them. I mean, their quarterback's out for the season. They don't have a great line up front, typical to what they usually have. Luke Fickell's trying to spread it out a little bit more. And I've talked to some guys that are in Wisconsin's media, and they just say it's really hard to even cover and adjust to because they're so used to the running backs like Monty Ball and Melvin Gordon and the ground and pound take 15 plays on an 80-yard drive. It's not really their strategy now, and I think that bodes well for Nebraska. I would put Wisconsin as the most winnable, USC at 2nd, and Iowa 3rd.
Okay, let's take the suit and tie off and put the coach's headset on here for you, Mr. Bartecki. Coach Bartecki, what does Nebraska need to focus on most during this bye week?
Offense. I mean, that's simple as that. They got to try and see what Dana Holgorsen sees. They got to probably have some internal conversations about the strategy going forward and try and get something figured out.
Can't argue with that. That's some good takes there, Coach. For Jake Bartecki, I'm Andy Klassen. Thank you once again for watching another edition of Nebraska Football Now.